nieces and nephews, for our grandchildren. And we work in our own way using our own talent in order to achieve those things. And as we do, we should take opportunities to lead, opportunities to improve, whether it is the organization that we work for or the community in which we live or the place of worship that we attend. Whatever is our passion, we need to reach out and reach up and say, I am here to help and I'm going to make a difference. Every one of us should be a catalyst for change. Scientists are important catalysts for change. Administrators are important catalysts for change. Every one of us can make a difference. And sometimes it's challenging, especially if there are very few women in a field. It's challenging for the women, but it's frankly challenging for the men because they don't have enough diversity if they don't have the minds and the thinking and the voices of women on their own teams. And reaching out to help young women scientists, to bring in more women, to have every laboratory be a diverse laboratory, diverse in terms of having women and men, diverse in having people of different nationalities, different backgrounds, because all of us think differently. And we're stronger if we put all those different thoughts together, if we don't all just direct ourselves to one mindset or one commanding mindset. So we can change, but we have to be open to change, and we have to be supportive of many others to help promote and actually institute change.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series on August 15th.
Good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third webinar of our Catalysts of Change Women Leaders in Science series. At CIMMYT, we are hosting these TED Talks meets fireside chat style series on women leaders because we want more women leaders in our institutions like ours. As we recently launched our CIMMYT Strategy 2030, we are as an organization committed to stop management by narrative, to stop admiring the problems, and to shift even more from a permission-seeking organization to a let things done organization. And our strategy has a clear component on social inclusion, also represented in our new CIMMYT logo, where you will find a colorful swirl that represents each color, each individual in their own tone, in their own chrome, in their own being. To achieve the goal of a broader representation and gender balance in science, we need to provide more opportunities to hear from current women leaders about their life journeys, their lessons, their insights, their choices, their recommendations, their story for us. In this series, therefore, we highlight women who are leaders in all sorts of capacities. Many more to come from the field, from many disciplines, from different leadership styles, because leadership can take very many different forms. Today, I am honored and humbled to feature in today's seminar one of my true heroes, one of the people I deeply admire for what they did, especially for what they stand for and who they are. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to present to you Catherine Bertini. She's an accomplished leader in an international organizational reform and a powerful advocate for women and girls' rights. She has a distinguished career improving the efficiency and operations of organizations that serve the poor and hungry people. She has done that in the United States and around the world. She was deservedly named the 2003 World Food Prize laureate for her transformational leadership at the World Food Programme, which she led for 10 years and where she generated a massive positive impact that still today works through and has saved and changed the lives of many, many women and girls. While in the US government, she expanded the electronic benefit transfer options for food stamp beneficiaries, created the food package for breastfeeding mothers, presented the first effort to picture healthy diets, and expanded education and training opportunities for poor women. Catherine, thank you for honoring us with your presence here today. And thank you to everybody who has joined us massively on Zoom and on the different channels that we have opened on social media. I'm sure that we will enjoy and learn a lot from Catherine's outstanding leadership. Catherine, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Director General. Thank you very much, Bram, for that very kind introduction. Congratulations to you on your official role as Director General. And thank you and CIMMYT for putting together this program. I understand that the first sessions have been really exciting and interesting and hopefully challenging. And I hope today's is also. So I'll start with a few slides and then happy to work with Natalie on questions and discussion. And also I want to thank Jenny for helping to put this together. Girls can do anything. We all can, every girl or former girl in this room. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story about how that worked for me. So yeah, they even once upon a time had girls wearing skirts while riding bicycles. This was part of my growing up as a young child in Syracuse, New York, with parents who worked very hard to make sure that we had roofs over our heads and good education and enough meals each day. And I learned during that time that there were some expected careers back then for women. Teachers, secretaries, and nurses were the primary jobs once upon a time. I liked music. You can find me in this picture, the very smallest person, the little girl, third from the left, and the people in front of me are kneeling or sitting, by the way, and I'm standing. I love music. I spent a lot of time on it. I was going to be a music teacher, and I even went to the All-State, my last year of high school, which is all the best students in the state go to play in a concert, and I played the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, fourth movement, on the clarinet with band accompaniment, which was really quite an accomplishment. I was set. Now, along the way, I was influenced, as each of us are influenced by many different people. I was influenced by these readings or people. You don't think about it, I think, when you're being influenced, but after the fact, you think, I wonder where I learned that. And one of the first ones was a book my grandmother gave me when I was about 8 years old about Elizabeth Blackwell, who became the first woman doctor in the United States. And reading about her in this book written for 10-year-olds was to know that a woman could do anything, but that it might be really hard. You might have to work extra hard in order to achieve it. My father introduced me to a lot of classics and to a lot of writings of different philosophers. And one that I really stuck with was the British philosopher Edmund Burke, who wrote about freedom. And I was captivated after reading about him. But one of the quotes that I even used in my high school yearbook that he said was, "All that is necessary for the forces of evil to win in the world is for enough good men to do nothing." Now, while I amended that word men to be people, I really stuck by that view and still do during my entire life. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and the book of Matthew was very important to me, especially about his teachings about helping others. And his quote from God, "Whatever you do for the least of my brothers, you do unto me." My maternal grandmother was influential. She bought me that Blackwell book, but also when we would drive through a neighborhood and pass by people who were really very needy and looking for ways that we could help them, she would also say, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." I thought about that so often when I was at WFP or even at USDA, working to help support people. What would I need if I were that woman with multiple children, no husband, no job, no opportunities, and very little food? And what would I need? I had two aunts who were nurses. They were career nurses, and in large part that meant in the 50s that they were single, but they went off. One of them was in the Air Force. She was a colonel. One of them was working in another place, not at home. And they were really role models to me, even though nursing never really appealed to me. And then finally, my father, who inspired me in so many ways we don't have time to discuss. So one thing I say to you is to think about who are your influencers and what did you learn from them? Well, all of that went into all of a sudden my learning about politics, which started in my teens. This is a picture of me shaking hands with the governor of my state when I was 16 years old. And I was hooked. I decided politics was really exciting. By the way, you could tell this is in the 60s. Look at the outfits of some of these girls in the background. I could tell this is what I wanted to do. I mean, politics is really fun and exciting. A lot of people go to a lot of places, but it led to government. And government is where I could make a difference, I thought. That's where I wanted to be because I thought it was a creative place to be. I didn't view it as a big bureaucracy. I viewed it as a place where the people's place, it's paid for by taxpayers, and it's here to help people. And if only it had good people in it who knew how to manage, who knew how to organize, who knew how to care, and who were able to help make systems work better for others. That's what I decided I wanted to do. So this was here's my CV. I was in politics, and then I went into corporate public affairs. Why? I wanted to go into government for sure, since high school. But after 5 years of politics, and politics meant either partisan politics or women's movement politics, by the way. I was paid for the partisan part and volunteered in the other. But politics wasn't enough. I didn't think I could go into government that time because they didn't have anything really to offer. I wanted to learn more. And I thought the best way to do that was to be that people that would want to hire me might be corporations who were hiring for public affairs. So I did get a job in public affairs, in a company doing public affairs, which meant public relations, community relations, foundation relations, and lobbying. And then after I was there for 10 years, and I learned so much about management, about finance, about HR, about strategic planning, budgeting. And then I said, okay, now I can join the government. And I wrote to the White House, and a friend there said, yes, you're the kind of person we'd like to have in this administration. What would you like to do? And I said, I'd like to work with people. I'd like to be in social services. I'd like to be in service delivery. And so I ended up running the nation's welfare program. It was a program for single parents, mostly that met poor women and their young children. And we made some reforms in that program. And I moved from there in the next administration to run the food assistance programs for the country because the folks making decisions knew that the background and the client base running welfare was similar to the client base in the food assistance programs in the U.S. So that means food stamps, SNAP, women, if it's a children program, school lunch and breakfast, homeless shelters, Native Americans, many, many other programming. And then what was the next progression? I was recommended by the U.S. government for the job running the World Food Program. And so doing globally in a way what I was doing nationally. And again, trying to manage a process that improved the process. As the Director General mentioned in USDA, we changed major aspects of food stamps and of the WIC program. At WFP, we changed the whole of the organization of WFP. I had been preceded by a legendary manager, the director, and thought leader, Jim Ingram, just passed away recently at the age of 93 in Australia. Jim worked for his 10-year term to get WFP divorced organizationally from FAO and from EFED, which meant WFP could make its own decisions and do its own thing. That was huge. It was very important, and it allowed me, who arrived in 1992, right after the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, and the world was changing. It allowed us to change WFP very dramatically to be able to now meet the needs that WFP's met over many years, and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for a few years ago. Then from there, I went to managing the UN because Secretary General Kofi Annan said, Well, you've managed WFP well, now come do it at the UN. So that was my progression. Following that, I was a professor in graduate school. I was a member of a corporate board. And then following that, I've been a policy advisor on global food security and always an advocate for women and girls. Since we're talking about leadership, here are some of the things that I have learned that I'd like to share with you today. One of them is to find opportunities to show where you excel. You know you're very good at something within your organization, within CIMMYT or wherever you're working, but you haven't had a chance really to show that. There are different ways that you can orchestrate and make sure your bosses or people outside your line of work know what you're really good at. Say, wow, she's done a great job at that. Maybe she could do this. Network is important, not only at work today at CIMMYT, but every day, always. Network back to your college professors, to your other job bosses and colleagues. When I got that first public affairs job, I got it because two men were standing next to each other in the men's room at a conference. And one of them said to the other, I have a public affairs job that's open. I haven't found anybody to fill it yet. I was thinking that Bertini girl might be good for this. Do you know where she is? And guess what? The other man knew because I had recently reached out to him saying, I'm looking for a job in public affairs. Boom, the network worked. Surprise people who underestimate you. You may know who underestimates you, you may not. But this was advice Kofi Annan gave me one time with no question on my part. He just offered it. He said, don't worry if people underestimate you, because then it's easier to surprise them. So you can surprise people, and women can surprise people often much more often than they think. And then they get jumps ahead in the minds of the other folks about their abilities. Live in the world you join, but work to change what must change. I mean by that is, if you join an organization and then just say, oh, this doesn't work, this is, nobody's going to listen to you. You have to live in that world you chose. You can leave it, but then you see things that should change, and then you work to change those. That's making some priority about what's absolutely critical to change, or what's absolutely critical that you can influence to change. Here's one I learned also in the corporate world. Understand your tolerance for junk. And BS is what I wrote here, and what the organization level is for BS. So what do I mean by that? Every one of us has a tolerance level for how much stuff we can handle that's not directly related to what we do. Okay, come to CIMMYT, I'm going to be a scientist, I'm going to do this kind of research, it's going to be fine. But then you find, oh, you have to do this for HR. Oh, you have to go to these meetings because you have group meetings that you have to go to. Oh, you have to do this because the boss wants you to do it. All these things take away from your main focus and what you thought you were hired for. But they're all part of the bureaucracy that you joined. So there's a certain amount of it, every single bureaucracy in the whole world. And each one of us has our own tolerance level for it. For instance, an artist, most artists, they have no tolerance for anything outside what they're doing. That's why, in part, what they do, they're very successful painters or musicians or photographers, but they get to do most of that alone or in groups that they choose. And we don't. We've chosen to be in a bureaucracy. So we have to have a higher tolerance level than they do. They'd never make it in bureaucracy. But sometimes an organization gets so carried away with itself that its level gets really high at this stuff. So what I learned was you have to be sure that your tolerance level and is lower than the organization's level of this. And if it isn't, if the organization's level is too high, I'm sorry, I said that the wrong way. You have to be sure that your level is higher than the organization's, because if the organization's level becomes higher than yours, then it's time to think about leaving the job. You can't change all that other stuff. The other reason why to leave a job, I found, is if it makes you physically sick. Every once in a while, I counsel someone that this happens, and certainly it's happened to me in my one of my younger jobs is that you get home and you're sick. You're sick to your stomach, can't eat, can't sleep well, but it's because the job is so intolerable for one thing or another. Well, if you can't make that change, then that's also time to leave. I'm not saying that happens very often, but don't tolerate it. Just don't tolerate it. Be grounded in your principles. Know absolutely what is critical to you, what is critically important to you. And not only work toward those principles, but that helps you know where the line is if there's ever a question about principles. Listen to many, many others, especially those with different views and different life experiences. We cannot assume that what we know is always right and that we have all the information. And if we do so, we're foolish and we'll never be good leaders. We have to listen to so many others, whether it's other people in the workplace or people who we're working with. And here's one message for scientists. If you're developing some new wheat crop that is going to be the miracle of the new world for its ability to grow, have you tested that with the people who are going to taste it and eat it and cook it? Because we've had too many stories about wonderful new crops or wonderful new products, but when they get out to where they're supposed to go, nobody's figured out whether or not the people really want them or like them, or whether it's going to take 3 times as long to cook them and therefore much more water and firewood. So think about and listen to people from all different perspectives. Decisions are better that way. Leadership, anyway, it includes listening. It includes presenting a good example, and it has to be moving forward, because you just can't sit in one office and stir the pot and lead. You have to lead by going in a direction, helping together with the organization to establish the strategic direction, as CIMMYT has done, and move forward and all together in getting that done, and being fairly single-minded about moving forward, or you may never get to the goal. I learned at WFP that courage is not just for soldiers. Good leaders are courageous. Courage means making tough personnel decisions. Courage means sticking to decisions even when they're not popular. Courage means being kind enough to reach out to people that others would just kind of walk by, but it might be courageous to stop and change the pattern. Courage is important in all walks of life, but leadership and courage have to be connected. Diversity includes more robust results. We cannot just sit around a table and talk with people that sound like us. We can't just hire people that look like us. We found this at different places where I've worked, especially at WFP. You start off with an organization that's mostly men from the North, and you end up with mostly men from the North because people hire who they're comfortable with hiring if they don't have any other direction. Then you say, well, you need to hire more women. Okay, so then there's some women from the North. Well, what are we going to do about making this a organization that's really diverse and really listens to everybody? Like I'm sure many of you, I've had my share of being the only woman around the table. And eventually the rest of the people around the table realize that their table is going to be stronger and more productive if it has more voices from different backgrounds, and that means more women, more people from underrepresented groups, people from the North and the South, in the context of CG or the and it also means people with differing views. This is a problem that I think colleges in the US are not even grappling with because they don't pay attention to it, because diversity is also diversity of views. And it means listening to different views as well. Another thing I learned in organizations is that we all work differently. So some of us are really hard chargers and we move like this. And other people really need time to be process things, take time and move things through the system. And we're different. A lot of us are different in the way we approach it. And we have to respect all those different ways of operating too. Good leaders do that. Good leaders mentor other women and men in our organizations and outside of our organizations. Good leaders do not reinvent the wheel, which means you need a sense of history. If you already did something, the organization already did something, even if you weren't there, pay attention to what was done, know what was done, know what worked and didn't. Here's something that sounds really old, but I think it's really still true. Dress the part for your next job. Okay, so what do I mean by this? People might not even realize it. It's a subconscious thing, but if they're thinking about somebody for a job that's a level above you or 2 levels above you, something they may subconsciously think about is, well, does she look the part? So if that job has a different style to it, then wear the job in your earlier job. You know, I have a sports jacket on now. I'm not seeking a new job, but having a jacket or at least arms covered is a thing, right? So these days, of course, we only have to worry from the top up if we're doing most of our work by Zoom, but still, it's something to pay attention to. And finally, and most importantly, always do the right thing. Always do the right thing, even if it's difficult. And if it ended up being the decision that perhaps wasn't, that perhaps you could have gone a different direction, it's okay, because you know you did the right thing. You know that your analysis, everything you looked at, you know that this is right. I wrote about some of these things in a paper called Leading Change in UN Organizations. You can get it online at my personal website, catherinebertini.com. And we still, although it's a few years old, we still use it very actively. It's written for UN leadership, very relevant for CG, but it's relevant for most organizations really and with principles. So finally, almost finally, I want to go back to expected careers. I did become a teacher. I'm an emeritus professor from Syracuse University, and I also taught for a semester as visiting professor at University of Michigan and as a fellow at the University of Chicago and at Harvard University. I did become a secretary, assistant secretary for Food and Consumer Services of USDA and under Secretary General. But alas, I have not yet become a nurse. Perhaps my most exciting achievement, I'm really excited to share with you at CIMMYT, because Dr. Borlaug presented me with the World Food Prize for my work in leading WFP. And not only is it an immense honor to receive the World Food Prize, but to have received it from Dr. Borlaug is especially special. And then to put my politics back together in this picture you can see just to the left of Dr. Borlaug, the cheek of the then Secretary of Agriculture, Ann Benneman, and her colleague, the USAID Administrator, Andrew Natsios. They were in Republican administrations. But behind the gentleman on the right is Tom Vilsack, who was then the governor of Iowa, as Democrat. And then 2 other men in the picture are U.S. senators, former U.S. senators, a Republican, Rudy Boswich, and a Democrat, George McGovern. And to me, this is one of my favorite pictures to be able to summarize some of the things I'm so proud to have been able to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. This has been really a rich conversation, rich presentation. And yeah, we have many questions for you and hope we can have the time to keep discussing. Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia Palacios, a member of the Women in Crop Science group at CIMMYT. And I am really honored to talk and learn more from Catherine due to her experience with a career that included various international organizations. Her contributions have been instrumental in enhancing food security, nutrition, and gender equality. Her advocacy has shed light on the crucial roles that women play in food production, family nutrition, and community resilience, areas that are really in harmony with our CIMMYT's mission, and also they are really in harmony with my personal passion. So I am really honored and humbled to talk to you today, Catherine. We are celebrating 20 years since you received the World Food Prize, the nice pictures that you just shared. And among the many merits, you were distinguished for your transformative leadership at the WFP and for the positive impact on the organization's women. Could you share with us which were the key aspects of that transformative leadership and what was the most challenging part that you encountered during your journey at the WFP?
Thank you. Well, key aspects, we had to change virtually everything because the organization had been a committee essentially of FAO. And so all of the systems were FAO systems. So we had to create our new HR system. We had to create a new budgeting system, or vastly improve the one that existed. We had to create a new finance system. We didn't have field financial officers. We had to put those in place. We had to hire more women. We only had 17% women professional staff when I arrived. And when I asked why, my senior officers told me that it was because WFP does guy things. And I said, well, what is a guy thing? Well, we deal with planes and trains and trucks and helicopters, and ships, and women don't do those things. They said, oh, we'll find women that do those things. And one of my favorites to mention is that one of the first women senior logistics officers was hired in 1995 from Senegal, and it's Fatma Samura. And there might be somebody here listening today who knows what her current job is, which is Secretary General of FIFA. So if there was ever a big logistics job to do, she's doing it now at FIFA. But anyway, we hired many more women. It was 39% by the time I left. We had to hire more people from the South. And again, by the time I left, my senior staff, 22 members, were 11 from the Global South, 11 from Global North. So there were so many things that we had to do. But one of the first things we did was decide what's our mission. Okay, before we go around shuffling around making everything better, what's the purpose, what's the strategic agenda? And we were moving food, but why? So then ultimately we said, okay, and believe it or not, at that point, I think UNHCR was the only other UN agency that had a mission statement. So we made a mission statement. End of it was, our mission is to end hunger. So if our mission is to end hunger, how do we do that? We move food, but that doesn't do anything. They just go to warehouses, or maybe they're distributed, but hunger is not ended until somebody consumes the right food at the right time. So we said, well, who knows about that in the household? The women are the ones who know about that in the household. The cooks are the mothers and the grandmothers, the aunts and the daughters and sisters. And so we need to find ways to partner with women. And that became an important part of our work. And because it was part of our mission, it was more understood. And we have to get food to the cooks. Oh yeah, right. And we have to listen. We have to listen to the cooks. Oh yeah, right. And when we didn't, we made big mistakes not doing the right thing. So those are some of the things that we had to achieve, we just had to find our way to do them all.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes we are so disconnected. We talk about agriculture and nutrition, but yet we are sort of missing the intermediate part of processing and preparing the food and the important role that a woman can play on that.
That's right.
So, Catherine, I understand that instead of accepting the money from the World Food Prize, you established the Catherine Trust for Girls Foundation Education.
Yeah.
I imagine there have been multiple stories of pride. Could you share one in particular where you have been able to say, this is why I am here in this war, and this is my legacy to the world? And how do you think a woman like the one or the people that is actually attending this seminar can amplify these noble and impactful causes like this?
Oh, wonderful question. Well, again, during my WFP time, I remember being in my apartment at one point in Rome and just kind of having a moment where I said, the answer to the world's problems is educating girls.
Yeah.
Now, I guess I have to amend that, say the world's development problems, because I'm not sure it's the answer to all of these global wars or regional wars. But when girls are educated, there's so many more positive indicators in society. I mean, overall, a country that has a high percentage of educated women has higher GDP than a country that doesn't. And you shrink that down to the local level, the community and the family is going to be better off if the girl is educated and can get a paying job as well. And it goes beyond jobs because imagine even women farmers, and there's so many farmers in the world that are women. And if you can't read the back of the seed package or the fertilizer package. If you can't read, or if you can't count the rows that you've just planted. So IFPRI, your sister organization, NCG, knows and has done a lot of wonderful research about women in agriculture, nutrition and food security. But they have shown that educated women are more productive, even in the farm, than uneducated women. Educated women have healthier babies. They know more about what to do when they're pregnant. They know more about what the babies need. There's a lower child mortality rate. Educated women are more likely to send their children to school too. There's just so many pluses to educating girls. So yes, I created the Catherine Bertini Trust Fund for Girls' Education, and some wonderful stories of support we've given. Remember when the girls from Chibok, Nigeria, were their school was invaded and they were abducted, and when they were finally freed, they went back to different schools, and we were able to send funding to some of those schools to help with psychological counseling for the girls that had been through that terrible problem. We funded a school in Guatemala that supported girls who wanted to be photographers. Not that, there's going to be so many photographers in Guatemala, but it was a trade to learn, to take them to help get them to school to learn other subjects, but also then to learn something they could use either for the beauty of it or for potentially jobs in the future. We supported school in Yemen where girls, just for chairs, because even not having chairs is the reason why sometimes girls don't go to school, because they don't want to sit in the dirt, and there's no good way to sit. We support latrines because that's another reason why girls sometimes don't go to school. We supported a young man, Joseph Kaifala, in Sierra Leone, who created a girls' school. He just last year graduated his first set of girls from the class of girls from the academy there. Just wonderful program. So what can we all do? We can all reach out to girls in our own community, and whether it's going to give a speech to girls in junior high school or equivalent of that in our own hometown when we go home on vacation, just about what we're doing. I want to tell you about my job at CIMMYT. I want to tell you about my job as a scientist. I want to, tell you about some of the fun things that I do, interesting things that I do. I mean, nobody should underestimate that role model opportunity that we have, and I think that's great. There's a program in Africa called Award African Women in agriculture research and development. Yeah, and that's an interesting program because it gives support to women PhD agriculture candidates in Africa. But part of their getting an award, they have to agree to mentor women that are master's candidates. And when master's candidates get awards, they have to agree to mentor girls that are women that are bachelor's candidates. Well, it's something like that could be done in the community now with any special award, but you could just find a few girls to mentor, to give advice to at any age, whether they're at any age, whether they're in college or haven't even thought about college.
Thank you. Really inspiring stories and opportunities for all of us to leave a legacy in the world. No, they said that when we devote time to education and education of women, we really contribute to the flourishment of the world. So that's really incredible. Thank you. I guess, I mean, they said that we learn a lot from mistakes or bitter moments. Can you share with us a mistake that really it was an opportunity for a lesson, a life lesson for you?
Oh, I made a lot of mistakes. But think about a life lesson. I think I mean, I've had a career that I'm so fortunate to have had. I don't know if it's a mistake, but something I missed was not having gone to school to work on a doctorate. And now there presumably are people here in the audience who do have PhDs, and you have those because of the science behind them and the work that you want to do in that area, and that is really necessary in so many different aspects. But it's also necessary for senior administration roles as well. I didn't need one for as far as I went, but if I wanted to branch out to do something else, be a college president or a foundation president, then that kind of credential would have been important. Where I would have done it in my career, I don't know. I didn't really have time. But I would say to women thinking about working on a master's degree or on a PhD, even over time, if it's something you want to do, try to set aside time to do it, because will help you obviously intellectually, but it could also help you career-wise in the long term.
Okay, thank you. And well, in the evolution of leadership patterns, I mean, we have passed from authoritarian and hierarchical models to styles that are emphasizing more on the empowerment and inclusion. I think it is important to harmonize principles of respect and principles of rebellion. What approaches would you suggest to get this balance effectively between respect and rebellion?
Respect and
rebellion.
Rebellion?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly.
I as much as I think there should be lots of dialogue and lots of feedback, rebellion doesn't belong in a bureaucracy, but rebellion belongs in a democracy. So if you want to be a rebel, be in politics, and that's where and that's when, and you know, I was in politics for a while, but that's where you can take a stand and raise up the troops and get lots of people going behind you, literally marching down the street if you want to, but at least figuratively in terms of the positions that you take. And sometimes it's important to do that. Sometimes you just can't sit back anymore and say, yeah, I trust the authorities to do this. Sometimes you have to stand up and say, no, I'm going to try to make a difference in politics. So for sure, that's where it sits. Bureaucracies sometimes need significant stirring, but it's not quite the same. In the leadership book that I wrote, there's two charts that were given to me by a man named Pierce Campbell, now deceased, who was a brilliant organizational strategist, and he said that organizations go up. It was like an upside down U was his first chart. A very simple upside down U. And you go up one side of it, the organization is born, and then it's in infancy, and then it's in adolescence, and then it's a young adult, and then it just as it goes over the top of the U, the hump, it's mature. Yeah. And his position was that most organizations kind of when they get to that maturity level, and nobody tells you what you are, right? It's not like a street with a traffic sign on it that tells you. But when you get just over the U, the top of the U, you get mature, and then unless you're smart, you keep going down because you kind of rest on your laurels. Kind of, you just go, oh yeah, we're fine now, we're okay, and you just keep going, and then you kind of go downhill because you don't stay quick enough in your responses. You don't think enough about alternatives. You don't think about different approaches to the science that you're working on, whatever. And then you start going down, and unless you figure that out, or your leadership figures it out, moves the U back around so you go back up the hill again, you could end up being a very stale organization.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine. And just to close this interview, you mentioned the importance of self-awareness and the importance of feeling happy and feeling healthy when you are working. So there is a growing recognition of the importance of self-care to maintain enthusiasm and self-esteem to achieve our purposes in life. Which approaches or strategies or resources have you personally found most effective?
I've always tried to find friends who are not friends from work. Friends from work are really, really, really important, but I always try to have friends outside who you could talk to about things that don't have anything to do with work, or you could talk to about work and they don't know or care. I think that's a really important thing to do. The work-life balance issue that is so often talked about really is important. I think that people that just totally bury themselves in work constantly don't give themselves enough rest, enough intellectual rest to be able to be as sharp as they could be at work. And then family balance is always a challenge, and not a challenge that I have done well, but a challenge that's very very important.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And now we will open the floor for questions that are arriving. Isabel, the floor is yours. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you so much. We are grateful for your stimulating discussion and contribution. We appreciate Catherine Bertini and Natalia Palacios for this very interesting conversation. Now we would like to open the floor for questions and audience now. You may raise your hand to turn on your camera and unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can submit your question and comments via Slido. The Slido linkage has been published in the chat box, and also you can write your question or comment in the chat box if you prefer. So our first question, we have a first question from Slido. It says, how do you fight for change and push through resistance, but be respectful for different views and listen while convincing?
Yeah, very good question. You have to have a very strong rationale, first of all, for why. If you have a lot of people who you have to change, you have to have a strong rationale for why. And the most important thing is, it's not absolutely necessary, but it really helps if you could convince people of the rationale, even if they don't necessarily agree with the tactic, about how you're going to get there. At least if you agree on the rationale, on your goal, on your where you want, what your goal wants to be, then you can maybe easier agree on how to get there. But that's key. I mean, if for instance we just said we want to hire more women, well, fine, who cares? Somebody else. But if we said our mission is to end hunger and the women, and that means we have to partner with the cooks because they're the ones that are really going to do it. So we have to listen to cooks. Oh, by the way, those are women. We need more women on our staff because we can't send men to talk to a lot of those women in a lot of communities where they can't talk. Oh, yeah, okay, I get it. I mean, but at first it was, no.
Thank you. There is another question received from Slido. In CIMMYT, we are all trying hard to do better on inclusion, on owning some of the past mistakes Do you have any recommendations for us?
Again, I think the definition, everybody has to understand what inclusion means. And it's I think it's probably through a lot of dialogue internally. That's how I'd start, at least, having conversation about what is inclusion. Does it mean women and men? Does it mean people from different countries? Does it mean people from North and South? Does it mean intellectual inclusion? Let's all understand what it means. And then let's see some examples of how it works well in our own organization or in some others. And I think probably when you're dealing with an organization that's full of a lot of scientists, you have more consensus to build around, more explaining for not only because that's just how scientists work, let's see the empirical, findings or background or whatever, but it also is because you're probably more male than female in terms of the staff. So I think it's a longer term issue, but one that, with dialogue, you can get to, especially when you show the difference and show what can happen with a more diverse discussion. And also, I think the organization has to go out of its way. It's to help train younger women. For instance, if certain kind of scientists who work on maize are all men, well, then how over the long term, not going to get rid of the men, but how over the long term can you introduce more women into that? Can you hire assistants for them? Can you hire graduates, more graduate interns, and then look to that population, be people to hire when there are vacancies? I mean, there are different ways to think about this in terms of hiring over the long term.
Thank you, Catherine. There is one question related more on intelligence, artificial intelligence tools and languages to compete in this fast-changing world. So what would be your recommendation regarding on food security and on CIMMYT's mission? How we could overcome on this, or how we could adapt to these new technologies?
We have to put some really bright, thoughtful people who understand the top technologies on them immediately, so that they can translate the opportunities. You can't count on people of older generations to get it. It'll go by them before it'll be too late. So hiring people, if they're not already in the organization, who really know how to take advantage of the opportunities and how to protect against problems, it's really important to hire people who know how to do that. We at WP, we became really, really good at field communications. We couldn't have done that with the old crowd of staff, but a lot of young people who understood in the 90s what it meant to build a system that could have us have a daily communication, regular communication with sub offices in North Korea when nobody else could reach anybody outside of the capital. That was really huge, but we couldn't have done that with, older generation people. We had to do it with people who knew all the new technologies and could think about, well, why can't we do that? And then they did it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sarah Hearn would like to make a question. So would you please open your camera and your micro?
I've opened my mic, but it won't let me open my camera. So you're not missing anything. Yeah. Very nice discussion and presentation so far. Just got a question about changing culture, and how have you walked that tightrope between having a critique of a particular organizational culture and practice vis-a-vis team members seeing that as a critique of themselves? So it's this tension between an individual who has embraced part of an organizational culture and you're trying to change that. How do you balance that? Because it's a really difficult problem that we have to try and walk.
Yes, that's a very, very good question. I'll address it in a minute, but I'll say also that one other thing I learned from the organizational consultant. He said when you're really trying to change, especially doing cultural change, about a third of your work population say, great, how can I help? What can I do? Let's try this. And about a third of the work population will say, not doing it, it's the way I've always done it. And you're getting in my way. And then the rest are convincible. And so the thinking of the community of people that you need to motivate, and had been helpful for me to think about it in kind of different sections. Okay, here's people I can count on. They can help think us through. Here's people that really need to convince, but could also be really helpful in trying to work through some of the more thorny problems, and then might buy in even in a larger way or in a more significant way than the enthusiasts to begin with. But then the toughest ones are people who, as you say, they may be challenged themselves by what's happening, or they maybe just don't want to proceed. And I would certainly recommend spending a fair amount of time on that population initially in terms of talking through what people are trying to achieve, and then again, as I mentioned, hopefully there is an agreement at least of the goal. But then underneath it, there's trying to pinpoint what are the problems and can they be addressed. And I'm not going to say they all can be addressed, because sometimes they cannot. But there might be some thing about it that needs to be tweaked. I mean, about the message or the workload or the budgeting or something that would convince them that it's maybe worth it. And some of it is historical. One other final point, to appreciate what they did, and they know you appreciate what they did, even though you're moving to something totally different, because I think that helps a bit too. But some people will not be convinced.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much for your great talk and stimulating presentation. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Bram Govaerts, Director General of CIMMYT, to officially close the event. Dr. Govaerts, over to you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And Catherine, once again, thanks for taking the time to be with us. This was such an inspiring conversation, very thought-provoking remarks. Two take-home messages for me. Number one, let's appreciate what those did that came before us. And number two, we do need more dialogue, and therefore even more listening to each other, and let listening be one of our 4 strategic L's. For those that don't remember, lead by example, leap forward, learning by doing, and listen. I've gotten questions from some of you. Why are we doing this series today? Well, why today? Well, you don't just pull off this kind of a series with these high-level speakers and these engaging seminar thoughts like the ones we just heard today in a few days. And why this series? Simply because there are so many stories out there, so many things to learn from. We do not have to do this on our own. You do not have to do this on your own. There is no right or wrong here. There's just you, and you willing to come and listen and color your own color by mixing all we can learn with your own experiences. Just like our logo, we went from deep green to have an additional dynamic integration of colors. In our strategy, we take a system view towards a 2100 vision. And I think we all agreed we need all colors, all ideas to achieve our mission, a mission of science and innovation for a food and nutrition secure world. Having that said, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being your own catalyst of change towards our mission, and let's together find out who's up next.
My name is Lindiwe Majele Sibanda. I'm the chair of the CGIAR System Board. I'm a farmer in Zimbabwe. I'm a mother of 3 adults, and I'm a scientist. What excites me most about my work is when I work with farmers and when I'm at my farm. Just planting seeds, seeing them grow, getting babies from my cattle, my goats, and just being in open air where you're in touch with nature. But most important, using modern technologies to improve farming and to make sure we safeguard the environment. That makes me happy. To me, leadership is all about servant leadership. Don't deploy work that you yourself cannot do. And the people who really inspire me are Gracia Michelle and Mama Mary Robinson. They are simple, they are hardworking, they can connect at all levels, but most important, they give it to other women. They love mentoring girls and other women. Some of the major obstacles that I face as a woman, as a farmer, as an African are the biases that are associated with the three things. Women need to be helped, they are disadvantaged. Farmers are poor, particularly coming from Africa. And mothers need to spend more time at home and not be globetrotting to meetings. So, as upcoming women, make sure that you show you can strive and excel in all environments. It's not about either or, it's we can do it regardless of the circumstances. Women are natural agents of change, and all they need is a conducive environment. As women, we should be spending more time with other women, making sure we share our stories, our successes, and our struggles. The whole idea is to convince each other it can be done and that we are the best agents of change. So let's document the stories, let's take them to other women. That way we can achieve more impact and overcome the stereotype that we can't.
Please join our next seminar in the Catalyst of Change series on August 29th.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.